Hi, my name is Allen McPheeters, and I am the chair of the Island County Republican Party. Welcome to our Republican candidate interviews for 2020. This series of interviews features 5 candidates endorsed by the ICRP. In the 10th Legislative District, we have Senator Ron Mazzal and Greg Gilday and Bill Bruck running for state representative positions 1 and 2, respectively. Also in Island County, we feature 2 candidates for County Commissioner, Damian Green in District 1 and Commissioner Jill Johnson running for re-election in District 2. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to invite you to become a member of the Island County Republican Party. Members receive our monthly Central Committee meeting packet, which includes reports from the chair and treasurer, news from the Washington State Republican Party and Republican National Committee, and information about candidates, elected officials, and upcoming events. Members also receive invitations to special member-only events, such as our interviews last September with applicants for the appointment to replace retiring State Senator Barbara Bailey. Memberships start at $30, and higher-level memberships include tickets to our annual fundraising dinner. For more information, go to islandcountygop.com/membership. For this interview, we met with incumbent County Commissioner Jill Johnson, running to retain her seat. Island County, like most counties in Washington, has a 3-member Board of Commissioners, each elected from a commissioner district. The Board of Commissioners is the legislative authority in the county and also the principal administrative authority for the county government. Commissioner Johnson represents District 2, which is comprised of the city of Oak Harbor and areas to the east, west, and south. This interview was recorded on July 3rd. Welcome, Commissioner Jill Johnson. And we really appreciate your coming to tell us about yourself and your campaign and your experience as an Island County Commissioner. But let's start with maybe 5 minutes for an opening statement.
Sure. Well, thank you for creating this opportunity. There's not as many opportunities out there to share who you are as a candidate or as an elected official, so I appreciate the platform. I'm Jill Johnson. I was raised on Whidbey Island. I'm a graduate of Oak Harbor High School, home of the Wildcats. And then I went to Central Washington University, where I studied communications and economics. My goal was to be a business reporter and to tell the stories of entrepreneurs and different risk takers and their business success. And it was kind of a safe way to be a risk taker in my mind. But I ended up going to work in Olympia for a man named Barney Beeksma. He was state representative then, and I worked for the House Republican Caucus for a year. I went on to work at the Washington State Republican Party as a finance director, which is really a fancy way of saying fundraiser, but I like to say finance director because that sounds very authoritative. And I, for the next 10, 12 years, I did that as a job, going around the country, raising money for different candidates and working at different levels of government in support of elected officials in terms of how to get them elected. And then I moved back to Whidbey Island. My parents are raising my niece. She's got some developmental delays. Her name's Lydia. I talk about her a lot. And I wanted to be closer to her and my family and be supportive of her and just make sure I had a relationship there. And so when I moved back here, I went to work at Whidbey Island Bank, and then I became the executive director of the Chamber of Commerce. I did that for about 6 years, and then ran for Island County Commissioner because there was a significant issue between the city and the county on a land use issue, ironically. And I thought, well, the commissioner at the time really didn't have the right tone, was taking a too strident stance on many of the environmental protections that were being proposed. They weren't incremental. They were just they were very extreme, and it just wasn't in sync with who we were as a community. So I ran against her and won. And then I've been a county commissioner ever since. My first day of work was in 2013. And I decided to run again for county commissioner because I'm very concerned about the amount of experience that will be on the board if I'm not there. So I made that decision to run. My husband, Alex Pfeiffer, who's a realtor, was very supportive of the decision and encouraging for me to continue to do it because, as he describes it, I have far too much passion to not do it. And so he figured I'd just be sitting on the couch saying, that's not right. So best to just send me to work on it. And then for hobbies and things, I like golfing, which is going to the driving range. I only like to golf at the driving range because when you leave the driving range, it matters more where your ball lands. So I like golf only in those terms. And then Alex and I we're kind of farmers market people. We just like to go around and see all the local vendors and stuff in the community. We're just very community focused. It's probably one of my highest priorities, again, because I'm from here and it's my place and it's the people I grew up with are here, the people who mentored me, my family. So that's kind of my background and what motivates me to be in public office.
Very good. I'm going to pick up on a couple things that you just talked about. Let's start with this. There are 10 people running for county commissioner seats this year between District 1 and District 2. You're the only one who's actually done the job. So can you tell us a little bit about what it's like being a county commissioner, what your days and weeks are like?
I find the number of people who are running for county commissioner interesting because if you ask people what a county commissioner is, majority of them can't tell you. And so I think there's a perception that this is kind of an entry-level position, maybe that you can do part-time, get your feet wet in government and kind of see how it goes. And that's actually far from the truth. This is a full-time job. I think the minimum amount you could spend as a county commissioner and just put checks in the boxes. So not accomplish really anything, advocate for anything, but just simply show up, sign your name where you're supposed to and smile is probably, you could probably get by with 25 hours a week or so. But again, that's just showing up to the things you're supposed to show up to. It's not taking the time to learn or to do anything. So the job is really that administrative role of like you'd see in a mayor and the policy role like you'd see in a city council, all combined into one position. And that authority is then divided up with 3 commissioners equally, which means it takes 2 commissioners to accomplish anything. 2 have to be on the same page to go in any direction. 1 can't direct things independently. So so it sounds like it's a lot of power vested in a singular position. It is, but then it's divided up. So you have to do this whole compromising thing. And there's a lot of that. So really my schedule, Monday, I do constituent work. I meet with people either in the office or in the community. Emails, Monday's the email day, return phone call day, typically Monday. Tuesdays, we vote. And then we have executive sessions on that day, meetings with staff. Typically all that internal work happens on Tuesdays. Wednesdays, we have work sessions. So that's the day that we all 3 sit there and the department heads come to us requesting changes to contracts, floating ideas by us. It's policy, it's administrative. Everything has to get vetted on that Wednesday before it goes back to a Tuesday meeting to be voted on. Thursdays are typically the days that we do our committee assignments. So I'm on the Solid Waste Advisory Committee, which sounds geeky, but it's actually super interesting. We talk about recycling rates and how you get rid of biosolids and the cost of all of that and our options for doing it better. I'm on 3 behavioral health committees, 1 regionally, 2 at the state level. So I have meetings related to those issues. The IT committee, I'm on the IT committee. I was just trying to think of all of them the other day, and it literally, you just kind of show up in routine. The Northwest Workforce Council, the Council on Aging and Disabilities, I'm on that. That's a regional council. So, I mean, we each have anywhere between 10 to, I think the most I ever had in a year was 16 different committees outside of what you do. So and those are committees where you literally sit on board of directors. So you vote on their budget, oversee staff, different activities. And then Fridays.
I'm sorry, I wanted to ask you about that because, I used to sit on the Oak Harbor Planning Commission, which meets once a month. And I think most of these boards and committees meet monthly. Is that right?
Right.
And so the casual hearer might think, oh, it's something she has to do once a month, big deal. But the Planning Commission, we got meeting packets that could be from 40 to, with some of the land applications, 600 pages worth of reading material, oftentimes getting them just about a week before the meeting. Is that the kind of workload you get from each of those committees? They give you some big packet you've got to work through?
You get a packet, a budget, staff recommendations, policy recommendations from each of those committees you're on. And I would say really the truth of it is you're on it with commissioners from other regions as well, oftentimes. So what happens is different commissioners will find different passion areas. So I'm very engaged on the North Sound Behavioral Health Organization. And then when I sit on the Northwest Regional Council, which does developmental disabilities and aging, I'm engaged, but not as engaged as I am on the other.
Sure.
One of the other commissioners from San Juan sits on both of those committees with me. He's less engaged on behavioral health than he is on the Northwest, the Council on Developmental Disabilities and Aging. And so what you tend to do naturally is you'll find different commissioners within your own board and within the region who step up to kind of champion different issues so that everything has a real in-depth champion. You look at all that stuff, and if there's a red flag, you say, hey, this seems off, but I don't dive in as deep on every committee as I do on some. And then the goal is to make sure that there's at least one commissioner who's diving in deep on every committee, because we've seen what happens when everybody's just like, nodding their head and not asking tough questions. You're still a board of directors. You still have to do that duty. So if nobody's doing it, I'll dig in deeper. But typically what I've seen is that with a moderate level of engagement in most areas and a high level in some areas, the system kind of works, that everybody kind of picks their place to really dig in. But those packets can take a couple hours for each committee.
I'll bet.
Yeah. So, and then Fridays, more constituent things, more community meeting or board meetings, if some of them are on Fridays. And if ever you get a day off, that could be Fridays are usually the best time to do it. And the 5th week of the month. So if you're a county commissioner, you just live for the 5th week of the month, because there's not a Tuesday meeting and your schedule usually is a little bit lighter. So we'll all try to take time off on the 5th week so it doesn't interrupt the flow of work. Mm. And then, constituents, they will reach out whenever, right? So Saturdays, you have events to go to, or people have questions, and they're not really interested in what you're doing. They really need you to be interested in what their problem is. And so typically you have work, pretty much all the time. I don't work on Sundays as a practice. I mean, I really don't. So, and that's mostly just to create some boundaries for my personal life as well. I mean, I got a husband and he doesn't like it to be all about other people all the time. So you got to build in some space for that. But it is not an entry level. It's not an entry level job. You're an administrator of an organization, a CEO of an organization. And then again, as I mentioned, the 3-way split of power. We do all of that administrative work and policy work in public, because 2 people can't work together in private, right? Or that would be, we would be in violation of the Open Public Meetings Act, and 2 constitutes a quorum. So I'm always aware that people say, well, county government's the most volatile. Why can't those people get along? And it's been that way historically. I asked about it because I was like, is this just a Jill thing? Like, why are these meetings so contentious? And when you talk to staff who's been there a long time, they're like, no, they've always been that way, because you don't work out your details in a caucus. So when I worked in Olympia, you'd go behind closed doors, the caucus would work it out, the debate would happen, you open the doors and everybody goes out and smiles, right? Or even if you're on a committee, you take testimony from people, you go into your committee rooms, you decide what bills are going to come out and what bills aren't going to come out based on whatever negotiations they do, private. We sit at a table, our first pass of information is in public, our first reactions to what the other commissioners think is in public, our negotiations on how to get things done are in public. I mean, it is, and that's true about the administrative function of the job too. So if you want to discipline an employee, you can go into executive session to talk about their performance. if you want to take action on that performance, give them a corrective action plan, do anything that involves directive, you have to come out in public to give the directive. Well, can you imagine being that employee? So typically what happens is that we'll discuss what the issues are in private, and then one commissioner will take responsibility for dealing with that individual who needs some corrective action utilizing HR and the tools we have there. The other two stay out of it so that we don't have any quorum problems or violations. But then that individual will usually try to meet with the two commissioners who aren't talking to them to undercut the one commissioner that is, right? Because you need two and you only had one. So it's like, well, maybe this one isn't telling me, when they're telling me I have to improve in these 3 areas, maybe that's not the majority of the board. So you also spend a fair amount of time relationship managing because of the way the 3 is all set up. That's probably what it took me the longest to learn. It's not easy. It's joyful. I mean, I'm so honored to do it, but it's not easy.
Yeah. It sounds like a convoluted system and designed intentionally to be that way.
Yes. I mean, I think on some level, as much as we all want government to be efficient, how convoluted it is, how bureaucratic it is, slows it down enough so that you can't just push stuff through, right? Yeah. And from a public standpoint, I can see where there's that value in that. As somebody who's in it day to day, there are days that I just pray for more efficiency.
Oh man. Okay, well that's actually really interesting, and I think it's surprising probably to most of the people who hear this, certainly to me, that I think most people think of elected officials as being primarily policy people and not administrative people. Just if you were going to put a percentage split on your time, where does that balance lie? Is it 50-50 admin and policy, or is it weighted one way or the other?
So for me, because most of my district's the city of Oak Harbor, right? So a lot of the policy decisions that other commissioners are dealing with their districts, quality of life policy decisions, a lot of that is controlled by the city in my district, and a lot of constituent relationship and constituent issues are really city issues, just jurisdictionally. So I don't have as much pressure on that side. So I spend about, I'd say 60 to 75% of my time on that administrative function. I spend a lot of time with HR, IT. I'm on the risk management committee for the state, so I spend a lot of time with risk. I spend a lot of time with department heads, making sure we're focused on our goals. How are we going to get there? What are you struggling with? When things start falling apart at the work session table, I go back and try to see what's going on, because there's usually a problem that they are trying to solve that they don't want to tell us about. And then I try to help solve the problem, and then they say, you know what, we got this. Thank you for playing. So, but I spend a disproportionate amount of my time on the admin piece of it.
Okay, that's interesting. Not what I would have expected.
Well, also because I'm not a big regulator, right? And so policies usually lead themselves to new rules and regulations. And because I feel like we have plenty, I'm not as also motivated sometimes to engage in new policy discussions, because I don't need them to end up in more requirements on people.
That might be a good segue to the next topic. So I think a lot of people have a very clear idea of what it means to be a Republican at the federal level, certainly. At the state level, probably. I don't think a lot of people know what it means to be a Republican at a local or a county level. So in the piece that you do spend your time on policy, how does being a Republican inform those policy choices? Clearly, you have a bias towards less regulation.
I do.
What else?
So I like to invest our budget money in educational programming. So I've been a supporter of WSU because it educates people on how to make the right decisions. And I find that when people know what to do correctly, most people do it. So I spend time asking, what have we done in terms of public outreach and education to make sure that people are empowered to do the right thing versus told what the right thing is. And then from a policy standpoint, a lot more questions about what does it cost in the short term? What does it cost for us to stand up a program or service? What does it cost us to maintain that over time? That there are things that are super fun, right? But then when you look at the long-term costs of how you maintain that, operationally, we're not well positioned to carry it forward. Even if we get money up front to build it, you still have to repair it, replace it, maintain it. So I ask a lot of questions about that. A lot of questions about scope. Is this our lane? Should county government be in this conversation at all? Is this our responsibility, or is it the responsibility of another level of government? Is it something that an outside agency should do? Are we any more than conversation conveners or maybe conversation leaders, but does it need to result in a body of work for us? So those types of real clarifying questions, prioritization questions. I tend to, a lot of the issues at the state and federal level involve social issues. The county does not deal with social issues. That's not where those policy decisions are made. So we fairly implement government at that kind of local level. And there's not as much partisanship that takes place. And you don't really notice it until conservation futures, should we buy something or should we not? That sometimes gets a little politicized. Climate change related issues, how far do we go in regulating different activities? You'll sometimes see partisan issues there, but rarely does something just fall right down the line. It presents itself more in thought process. How we engage in the conversation is usually where you see the ideology present itself the most.
That might lead to this question. When you were elected, and up until the beginning of last year, you were one of 2 Republicans on the Board of Commissioners. Now there are 2 Democrats and a Republican. Can you talk a little bit about how that's changed what your job is like?
So I'm thankful for this time period where there haven't been 2 Republican votes, because it demonstrated to me the value of having 2 Republican votes, and also it showed a culture difference. So the first 6 years, the questions were very defined and proposed to our staff. This is what we want to know. This is what our priorities are. And not everything was prioritized equally. And I don't want to be disparaging to my colleagues. I mean, they're great, but there are definite style differences. And so right now, everything's pretty much a good idea. It's hard to figure out what the clear priorities are, even for me, and I sit at the table with them all the time. And then I have noticed lately that I say no a lot in public. And I can count on my hands the number of times I said no in public the first 6 years. And what I realized is that a lot of ideas didn't get momentum in those first 6 years. We're just like, no, it's not within our scope. We don't have the resources for that. Let's both make the big things the big things. And the ideas never came to the table. Now these ideas are starting to come to the table, and I'm in a position to say publicly, no, I don't support that for these reasons. It used to be that the breaks of the organization all happened kind of behind the scenes, right? The only conversations that came forward were conversations that had momentum around them, pretty much in a bipartisan way. Because if Rick and I were on board, for example, Commissioner Hanold and I were on board, Helen are usually on board. There weren't very many things that we pushed forward that she was opposed to. I think her greatest disappointment is we were always opposed to more things than she wanted to accomplish. But now all the ideas are coming forward. And so publicly, I say no a lot more. And that has been eye-opening to me.
Interesting. Yeah, I can imagine that being the case, because Janet St. Clair and Rick Hanold are wildly different people in what their policy preferences would be. That makes sense.
I mean, and also I would say there's the partisan piece of it, and then there's this local piece of it. And I'm not saying that if you're not local, you can't be a county commissioner, but there is a unique understanding of culture that is important on that board. And so some of the ideas that come forward now with Rick's replacement are very big policy ideas, very urban in focus, very focused on what other urban counties are doing. And I'm like, well, that's not relevant to us. Like, I appreciate that, you know, there's a desire to be a policy leader and to play regionally and play on the state level. But in all reality, you're delivering local service and you need to be hyper focused on your citizens, not on, you know, name dropping from somebody you talk to in King County. Those policies don't fit us. That's the tension local governments have all the time with state mandates, right? One size doesn't fit all. So quit bringing your urban ideas to us. They don't work.
Right.
Said lovingly.
Well, so let's expand a little bit on that. You've been in office for 7.5 years. One of the things you said that you've learned is about the differences between being the majority and minority. What else have you learned, and what are you most proud of having accomplished in the last 7.5 years?
I mean, I've learned a lot about collaboration, right? And as much as you think, well, you sit at a table and you just put issues out there and you duke it out. A lot about give and take, right? To listen to what your colleagues' priorities are and make sure you're being supportive of their goals when you can be, because you need them to be supportive of your goals when you need them. So I've learned a lot about that, a lot about the county budget. I mean, I say this frequently, and I really hope people understand it. And it's not, it sounds insincere coming from me, but it's actually really a true statement. I've been a part of writing 7 county budgets, 8 at the end of this year. Commissioner Price Johnson is not coming back to the Board of County Commissioners. She had more experience than me on the budget, but now we're down to Janet, who has written 1 county budget. And we're going into an economic downturn as it relates to the COVID revenues that aren't coming in from sales tax. And my understanding of how that budget works, how it's leveraged, how the different funds work, what you can interfund loan to one program to support it for the short term. I mean, you are going to have a hard time replacing that fast enough for the economic consequences that are coming forward to the county. And so I know that budget really well, and I would not pull a 7-year county commissioner off the budget and replace it with somebody who has 1 year of experience going into an economic downturn. Yeah. It's just not, responsible. Then, and then probably the thing that I didn't know I would be interested in, because as I shared, I ran for county commissioner on a land use issue, but I really have taken on this role in behavioral health. There's been a lot of state changes in terms of how we treat people with mental health and chemical dependency issues, probably more so in the last 5 years than in the last 20, 30 previous years. The whole system of funding has changed. The state's role in who they care for and who they're willing to care for has changed. And there's a lot of local impact in those decisions. So if you think about rural communities that don't have access to care facilities, if their hospital doesn't have access to mental health providers, legally the hospital can't just bed somebody in there and strap them down unless they provide services. So if the primary reason they're walking in the door is a mental health crisis, they can't hold that person. So they put them out in the community. Well, then what, right? So then we put them in jail for disturbing the peace or something like that. But our jail folks aren't designed to deal with mental health issues. I mean, that is not what they were hired to do, and that's not the job requirements. Yet it's what it's becoming. So I started falling into some of these conversations, recognizing that this is a financial strain on our system, and B, and these aren't A, B in terms of priorities. These are A and A. That it's not humane what we're doing to people. They're sick in lots of instances. If you have schizophrenia, you didn't wake up and say, hey, today's my day, right? They're sick, and we don't have that treatment model in place. So I started getting engaged in that, trying to understand the financial ramifications of this, and then also the local impacts of the state decision. And I really have risen to being a leader in the state on this. There is actually a state task force that I created. It's so hard to say but this is actually true, that I created, because which is designed to have local government, counties, work with the healthcare authority to say the investments that you're making in these places are leaving way too many gaps, and we're seeing too many impacts in our community. And so we built this collaborative committee. The Ruckle House Center is bringing us all together to make sure that we're getting the feedback. Investments are there for behavioral health in the right ways, not necessarily to counties. Counties are struggling because they used to do behavioral health, and now they're getting pulled out of behavioral health, and we think that's a tragedy. I actually don't care where the service gets delivered. I think the county government may not be the place for the service to get delivered. I just want to help drive the investments to the right place so that in our local community, we don't see people being hurt or targeted or marginalized or going untreated because our system that said it would care for them fell apart and we didn't make the investments in the right spot. So when I say I'm hyper local, I am. The only issue I engage with on the state level is behavioral health, and because commissioners turn over a lot, I've become a de facto leader on that. I'd like to think it's because I'm smart, but I'm sure it's just because I've been there the longest.
Hey, there's a lot of merit in that. 95% of life is showing up, right?
That's true.
Well, you know, I have a long list of other questions to get to, and we are running out of time. So I'm gonna back burner some of these because I know we could talk for another hour on all the interesting things going on at the county.
I know I promised you I'd be concise and get to the point, and then you saw what happened.
Well, it's an occupational hazard.
It's true.
But you know what? I do want to say this. Thank you so much for taking the time with us. I think it's so beneficial for people to get a chance to hear what county commissioners do as we're moving into an election cycle. So I thank you for that. If people want to get in touch with you to help out with your campaign, what's the best way for them to reach you? Is that your Facebook page or?
I do a lot on Facebook. I have electjilljohnson.com website, okay, and you can go there and send an email or my phone number. It's out there. So it's 360-632-2558. I would share that I hate talking on the phone. So usually like a quick text is better so I understand the context of what we're going to talk about, and then it's easier to call back.
Yeah, I find it's so much easier for me to get communication from people, something in text, because then I can refer back to it and really, think about it and that kind of thing. So that makes sense.
And then one other thing, if I have time to add it real quick.
Sure.
So I didn't talk about the independently elected officials at all, and Island County is made up of independently elected officials. So the prosecutor, the judges, the sheriff, the auditor, the assessor, the clerks, they're all elected independently. And I know that there's some conversation out in the community about oversight, what kind of oversight the commissioners are exercising over those departments. And I just want to be really upfront that we don't have policy oversight over those independently elected officials. So if you're concerned about who the prosecutor chooses to prosecute, that is actually something that you as an elected citizen need to deal with the prosecutor on. I'm not trying to be deflective, but we're getting a lot more questions about that. And other than budgeting in terms of making sure those departments have the adequate resources, how those departments are run, who they choose to prosecute or arrest, or what procedures that they have in place, those are up to the individual elected officials. I have a lot of confidence in ours. I think we have good independent elected officials, but I did, in that context of what does a county commissioner do, there are limits to our oversights of independently elected officials.
That is actually one of the geniuses and one of the most frustrating things about our system. The power is spread very diffusely. Yeah. At the county level, at the municipal level, at the state and federal levels, but it's hard to know who the right person to talk to is when you have a concern. So it's a double-edged sword.
I'm happy to refer people. I just I want to create clear expectations about my ability to. I can have conversations and try to influence from that standpoint, but I don't have authority that's been vested in us.
Right. Very good. All right, great. Thank you so much, Jill.
Well, thanks.
We're going to be putting this up on the website. We're recording this just for the benefit of viewers. We're recording this on Saturday, July 3rd, or Friday, July 3rd. I got the day off, so it feels like Saturday. I expect that we're going to have this up on the website and YouTube and everything on Monday or Tuesday. Ballots drop in less than 2 weeks, week and a half. And so look for your ballot and vote for the candidate of your choice. Make sure you get those ballots in. All right. Thanks, Jill. We will talk to you again soon.
Thank you again.
You bet. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks, Alan.
That was our interview with Commissioner Jill Johnson, running for re-election in Commissioner District 2. Here's the address for her website and her Facebook page. And here are the websites for all of our featured candidates. For more information about the Island County Republican Party, go to our website at islandcountygop.com. Thank you for watching.